In order to understand what this podcast is all about, you need to do something first. You need to believe that all things are possible. My name is Henry Saint-Juste. My story is pretty simple. I am an immigrant. I am an Afro-American. I went from college dropout to software architect. And you can too. All right. Welcome to Degree Optional. My name is Henry Saint-Juste, your host. And today we have Ash Barrett. Hey Ash, how you doing today?
Doing good, Henry. How about yourself?
I'm doing well. First and foremost, thank you for accepting this invitation to come on the podcast. Can you tell our listeners more about yourself and who you are?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, just glad to be here to be able to take part in this discussion. My name is Ash Barrett, and right now I work for NetJets Aviation. I've been recently promoted as a solutions architect in the first quarter of this year. But before that, I was a lead software engineer for about 5.5 years, 2 of which is with NetJets. I'm still wearing that hat. But prior to that, I was with another large organization.
Awesome. What led you to pursue a career in tech?
So, well, I've always had an interest in software engineering as far back as high school. But when I went to college, I ended up choosing a business degree and ended up working in various careers, wild careers like sales, leisure and hospitality, retail management, accounting, and insurance, particularly in customer service. But it was in my accounting role, which was at a small medical supply company back in Virginia, when I discovered the power of tech and what it could do for me. And that's when it started to become really attractive. So for instance, an example, when I was in the accounting role, it took me about 3 days to do like a very tedious accounting task. And I was just sick and tired of it. And I was just bored out of my mind. So because I played around with computers when I was young, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in this conversation, I picked up some problem solving skills, and I had a knack of knowing how to communicate with computers. So I did some research on how I can automate this process, because I just hate working. So you can kind of say I'm lazy. And it's funny because I spoke to quite a few software engineers, and some of them have said the exact same thing. And that's what made them do coding. So I took that 3-day process and, shrunk it down to about a few hours within 1 day. Which was huge. And man, was my superiors super happy. And so I was having fun, real fun for the first time. And I felt like I was actually contributing high value, real value to an organization. So that's where really it started to launch that desire and that awareness that technology was going to be the ticket. And so finally, I ultimately left that organization because there was really no space for pursuing tech. And I decided to join Nationwide Insurance at a call center located in Lynchburg, Virginia. And I started out in customer service, and I was really concerned about doing a good job. And so I thought to myself, hey, tech worked for me at that medical supply company. Let me try that again. And so I did. And I wrote like a simple program to kind of guide me through the calls with policyholders and agents. And it was a success, and leadership found out and started to give me more tasks when it comes to, writing code to help make the process of the call center more efficient. And eventually I got recruited by Nationwide IT. So that's how I got linked into tech. So I guess it wasn't necessarily a pursuit. It's almost like it pursued me in a sense, and I discovered it, and then I just fell into it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. I could see that. Going back to what you were saying, so from the first company that you were with and you started automating, and then saying that you were lazy, I feel the same way. When I'm building something and it's like a repetitive task over and over and over again, I start to think, the wheels start turning in my head. How can I make this process? How can I short circuit the process so that way it doesn't take me this long time? How can tech improve it? That's awesome. It's good that your mind went there. But I wanted to know, or our listeners also want to know, did you take any courses to be able to write those scripts and programs?
No. I just started studying or researching on the internet. And I found this tool that was written by this guy in Israel, that it was a .NET library that had the ability to hook into Internet Explorer. Back then, Internet Explorer was really dominant, and use that to drive the actions that were happening within a particular web application. And so I just studied the heck out of that library, leveraged that, and used it to perform a lot of my tasks, because a lot of it was data entry and it was SaaS products that were being used. And so I used that technology to basically pull the data from a PDF file, have it basically comb through it, extract the actual data and find the data that is required, perform calculation, and then go ahead and populate those fields and submit. So if you can just imagine manually having to read through documents or remittance statements, and then having to doing like hundreds of them, and that's all you're doing. Now I have the computer just combing through it itself in seconds, deploying or populating those fields in seconds and hitting submit, and then going to the next set of documents and doing it again and again and again. So I just sat back, relaxed, drank some coffee, and just watched it. So it was pretty cool.
That's awesome. Like my head, like when you're explaining this, I'm thinking, first my head started going towards like before like web extensions were cool. You were building those. That's where my head went. Then as you talked about it some more, then I'm like, so before co-pilots were even cool, you built a co-pilot for yourself. That's pretty neat.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the co-pilot for the accountant. Yeah.
So when did you first realize you were an engineer?
Man, so that's really cool, because even then, at that moment, I didn't think I was an engineer. No, not even close, because I thought those were the real McCoys. Those were the real all-stars. But I first realized when Nationwide Technology basically recruited me and offered me a position as a mid-tier engineer, and this was with their customer service and billing. At least that's what it was called at the time. Now it's been renamed to servicing division of Nationwide Technology. And really, that was the first time I worked in an enterprise IT organization. I never before had the opportunity to do that, and it was awesome. I mean, prior to that, I was in the business side. They were giving me all these different projects. They even created a new position for me that was just so that I can just continue to build stuff to make the process better. But I really didn't have anybody that I can talk to about code. Nobody. It was just me, walking around my cubicle, turning the page of textbooks and just kind of learning. Like I had 3 SAMs teach me, I believe it was called, back in the day when you used books to figure out stuff before Google, right? And I'm just studying it and turning the page and just trying to figure stuff out. But now that I'm in this IT organization for the first time, and I still remember this, I went into a conference room and I was there with a tech lead, an architect, a scrum master, and we were whiteboarding a solution. And that was like the greatest experience I had that up to that date, because finally, for the first time, I'm engaged with someone else, with a group of people that are tech, that are talking the language of tech. And I was engaging with them even at that point in time. And I'm just a whippersnapper, you know, but it was awesome. So that's when I felt like I'm an engineer. I'm actually working with real engineers.
Nice. That's awesome. That feeling is great. Like when you're like in the room and you're talking and your ideas are going through and their ideas and, you know, everything is flowing. You're like, wow, like we're problem solving a solution. Like this is great.
Absolutely.
What strategies can we implement to increase minority representation in tech?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Because that, even to this day, we're still underrepresented by a lot. But I would say, I can speak from my own personal experience. What has worked for me, and even though my path is pretty irregular, it really started at home. The biggest gift I received that prepared me for tech was from my father. He actually bought our first computer when I was about 7 years old. And this might kind of tell on myself in terms of my age, but it was the IBM PC XT. I believe that only had like 20 megabytes of hard drive space. It was running MS-DOS with the floppy disks and about like 640K of RAM. I mean, it's laughable, right? It's totally laughable now. And even though the OS was just text and black and white screen, I was so fascinated by the fact that this machine was responding back to me, like, you know, typing into the C prompt and having it reply back. I just thought that was the coolest thing in the world. And then when I discovered the language of BASIC back then, that's when I was really blown, because now I was able to, you know, have this machine perform computation, like simple math, or do other simple operations, like try to have it ask me a question and then I'll answer, even though I'm telling it how to respond when I answer. But it was just so cool that I was able to tell it what to do. And it became, you know, really addictive. So I would say that, and we hear things like this regarding, you know, virtuosos and different other areas, like in the arts, like where you're a violinist or a pianist, whatever, and they get exposed at such a young age. It's like, that is like the best gift you can give your child, because those neural pathways get shaped right then and there, and it sets them up for that to be their strength. And I really think that's why I was able to break into tech, because even though I didn't have the computer science degree, when it was time to solve a problem, first of all, I was able to identify an opportunity, and I had the confidence and I had the skill, even though I didn't have the knowledge yet, but I had the confidence and the skill and the insight to know that it could be done. And I was able to do it because of that earlier exposure. So that would be the biggest thing for me, is to give your child that head start at home, if you can, if you have the means to do it. Which, you know, nowadays everybody has a iPhone, so I think you can. Yeah, that's my take on that.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great advice. Just because exposure, right? Like I think that is the common differentiator.
Yeah.
Just being able to play around and build those skills, even though you don't have that knowledge, that in-depth knowledge, but you have the skill, and now you know it's repeatable, just because of that exposure. That's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely.
What are the current trends in software engineering job market today?
So what I've been noticing and I'm sure unless you're living under a rock, the AI is big, right? It's really it seems to be taking over the scene in a lot of areas, especially of late. Generative AI for tech, I think is really impacting the industry. Things like GitHub Copilot, like you mentioned earlier. And right now, I've been seeing that it's helping, junior or inexperienced developers be more productive, because that's one of the big concerns of organizations today. And for those who are interested in tech, you probably notice in a lot of the social media that it's very tough to get a job when you're just starting out your first developer job. And, I can understand that. And even from the employer perspective, I can understand because, we're touching assets that is really valuable to the organization. And we want to make sure that we have individuals that know what they're doing, so then we don't suffer loss. And with mentorship of senior people on the team and technologies like GitHub Copilot, if the organization is able to, solve any intellectual property concerns, it can be of high benefit to the junior dev. But then there's the other thing too. OpenAI's, which is hugely popular in the normal space, the general population, and that's the ChatGPT. To me personally, it's just incredible. I personally use this technology when I'm doing research on different solutions for projects. It speeds up my process in terms of clarifying certain concepts or problem solving. Like sometimes, or at least prior to that, I would Google all the time for certain things, and that's well known as a developer. You're going to be researching via Google. But now I hardly use Google. I'm just going in and asking very targeted questions, and I'm getting very targeted answers. And not only that, I can follow up with other questions, clarification questions. So now my learning is going up as well as the problem is getting resolved. So it, to me, is a game changer. And it's going to continue to be a game changer in the industry. And so if folks are interested in trying to get into tech, definitely be familiar with generative AI and make use of it, because it's here to stay. I don't see that going anywhere. And then, of course, you have other things like cybersecurity. That's definitely trending still high in the industry. And I will also say cloud computing, in the sense of the dependency of cloud computing for large organizations, that is becoming the absolute norm, the standard. So I would absolutely be familiar with that as well, because just knowing how to write code is not going to be enough anymore. So yeah, that's my thoughts.
That's awesome. That's great advice. The first one, right, when you were talking about AI, I agree with that. I'm aligned. But then also myself, I was not on the bandwagon per se with like using Copilot and all that, because I'm thinking I can write this code myself. I don't need Copilot. But then I was speaking to somebody we used to work with in the past, Jeremy King, and he started talking about Copilot and using prompts rather than letting it assist you. Just give it targeted prompts so it can give you targeted answers, like you stated. And he said, like, Copilot right now could be your junior developer, and then you just come in as the lead or the architect and just clean it up a little bit and make it work. So that's how I've been approaching it now. So Copilot is my junior developer, my sort of like my intern.
Yeah. No, I can totally see that. Totally see that. Yeah. So now it keeps you at the high level thought process rather than dropping down to a low level. I'm going to write it in this particular code or syntax. You're not caught up in that anymore. You're having a junior developer write it for you, and then you just modify. I like that.
Yeah. What advantages or disadvantages do coding boot camps graduates have compared to those with traditional degree, or vice versa?
That's going to be kind of a tough one because I've never attended boot camp, so it'll be hard for me to compare a traditional degree with that. But I will say that as a self-taught software engineer, which in my mind is pretty close to boot camp in terms of focus, right? Because I know the boot camp, you're going to have that structure where as a self-taught, you have to manage that on your own. But the focus is definitely where there's synergy there. And the advantages to me, if you're going to go the boot camp or self-taught route, is concentration of effort, time savings, and definitely money savings for sure. And to me, those are very important things to think about, especially in the times that we're now living in. I mean, with college tuition astronomically high, I mean, it's just insane. And it's it doesn't seem to have an end in sight. It's just going to keep going up. All the options need to be on the table at this time. And we really need to start thinking about return on investment, not just money, but time. Because it's not, in my experience, the ability to learn fast and the ability to learn on your own are crucial. If you have those two, nothing can stop you. If you have to depend on somebody else, like an organization, like university or a boot camp, I'm not saying they're bad or anything, but I'm just saying absolute dependence on that, then I think you might want to rethink this path, or make that your top priority to overcome and have that ability to be self-learner, because that's going to be a crucial piece to this career. But with that being said, with the advantages of just the time savings and the focus and the money savings, the downside about that, though, is that general employment bias. And that's a very real bias, especially in corporate world, corporate America. It's a very real bias. And also low to zero network connections. That's another big hurdle that you have to overcome if you go this route. So there's pros and cons to the path, right? If you go the established path, you go get a 4-year degree in computer science, you're gonna get taught for sure. You're gonna get that foundation. You're gonna be taught how to think, right? And don't depend on the college for the cutting edge. That's not what they're known for. They're known to teach you how to think and how to problem solve. So if you're going to do the traditional route, make sure you view it in the proper lens that I want to develop my problem solving skill. But with that, that's 4 years of time. And depending upon where you go, that's a lot of money that you're shelling out there. So that's something you got to take pretty seriously. But what the pro is, if you go to a reputable school, typically they have relationships with companies, well-established organizations. You'll have access to or inroads into internships. When I went to my school, my alma mater, this was in SUNY Albany State University of New York, I received internships at Morgan Stanley. That was great. To have that on the resume, whoa, that's huge. And so you're building that credibility. And so if you're 18 and you haven't been groomed to think independently and to be able to navigate life on your own and to be able to close those gaps, then maybe college is a good thing for you, right? Given the deficits that you have. And that's where honesty and self-awareness has to be present. And if that's you, then I would say, yeah, go to college route. But again, return on investment. Let's not go to a private school. At least I wouldn't do that. I would try to look for a state school, maybe do a combination of community college and then for the first 2 years and then state school to wrap it up. And then you get the benefit of the college experience. You're not paying astronomical price. You're getting their benefit of the structure, their relationships with the companies, right? And you also have a broadened mindset in terms of the curriculum that you've been given, right? So that's the big thing versus self-taught thing, which I would say, if you're pretty mature, you might be switching from another career. That might be a very attractive option at that point because you know how to manage your life. Now is the time to get really focused and get in there, do what you need to do to get the skill. And then you have to manage the networking, establishing the relationships while you're going ahead and pursuing it. So that's my take.
Nice. That's awesome. There's a lot to unpack there. One of the things that you said was the traditional route, 4 years of school and teach you how to think critically. And then I think you also stated, or that's where my mind went to when you were speaking, boot camps, right? You manage your time, or if you're self-taught, you manage your time, you go, it's highly focused. And I think on projects, so you get to finish a project. How do I get from A to B and get this done rather than let's think critically?
Yes.
And then also I'm aligned also with, do the 2-year degree at a community college if you want to go the traditional route and then transfer to another school to be able to get those internships and having those companies on your resume to have those working real world experiences. One thing that I've been working with is with different schools, trying to help them come up with different curriculums that they can implement while students are in high school right now. So for juniors and seniors, so that way they can earn their associate's degree in computer science while they're by the time they graduate high school. So then by then, when they graduate high school, they can already start those internships and then just transfer to another school to be able to finish off their degree.
Wow, that is fantastic. That sounds fantastic. I mean, you're talking about time saving and money saving with that. You just checked off all the boxes.
What are the most common mistakes candidates make during software engineering interviews?
Unprepared. Specifically, so there's different ways of being unprepared. One is you haven't thoroughly understood what the role is, and you weren't honest with what you're able to do versus what the job is requiring. So, because sometimes you might say whatever it is it takes to say in order to get the interview, and then when you show up in the interview, we're gonna discover it anyway because we're gonna ask very targeted questions. And now, not only did we kind of waste our time, but you also wasted your own time, right? And I think that's a mistake. I think it is better that you understand truly where you're at and target the position that you know you're qualified for. Or if that role that you're qualified for doesn't exist because companies are not hiring for that, then you might have to put in that extra work to level up in order for you to be qualified for that actual role that is being offered. So sometimes, and I know this is hard, and it's probably unfair that it shouldn't be this hard to get into tech. Back in the day, you can just, graduate, the basics, and then you would just learn and grow from there. Unfortunately, with reality, we have to adjust with the changes in the times. And the sooner we're able to adapt by being agile, the more successful we're going to be. Because I tell you, that never stops. I always have to be nimble and be able to adjust depending upon the needs and the demands of an organization or the marketplace. And so I think we also need to be able to do that. The other thing I've noticed, which I don't know if the candidate doesn't realize that it's not that big a deal, but they kind of make it a big deal, is if they don't know the answer, it's okay to just say, hey, I don't know. But I would definitely like to know what that answer is, or just be honest. But to me, it's more of a ding if you just try to make up something and hopefully it just slides in. Technical interviews is very black and white. And so making up something we're not going to give you points for creativity. It's no. So I'd rather you just be honest and just say, hey, I really don't know. And that way we can move on. And maybe at the end of the interview, that's just a small part that maybe we might be okay with you leveling up in that particular area, and that's it. But if you try to make it up, it makes me question, are you going to be the type of person that are going to be upfront with me as we are going through the work and projects, or are you going to let me know where areas you need help in, and then we can remediate that? So those are the things that stand out to me.
Yeah, I'm aligned with that too. So everything you said, as well as, if you don't know something, just say you don't know it, but I like to know, or if you give me some time, I can get you the answer. Because when you start making stuff up, that you lose all credibility in my mind. But yeah, So I'm going to skip a few of these questions just because I feel like we've answered some of them. But one thing I wanted to get into, you've mentioned AI is in high demand, cloud computing is in high demand. How do you stay current with the ever-changing landscape of technology and software?
Yeah, good question. I will say that as professionals, it might be a little easier for us to stay current because, especially if you're working in an innovative organization like the ones that we work at. I mean, we're constantly exposed to different solutions that could potentially solve a problem that we have at hand. And so we're always looking if the current stack doesn't necessarily address it exactly. That's when we put on our thinking hats, our research hat. We start looking, we start diving in. Obviously, you could be a subscriber to, different organizations where you can, kind of stay current. But for me, definitely is while I am doing the work, that's when I stay current. And if I feel like I'm not growing, if I'm feeling like the organization is not open to new things, that is definitely that's definitely a bad sign. And it's definitely something that alerts me to start thinking about, is this organization going to take me where I need to be, in terms of my growth, or do I need to start thinking of other avenues? Because the organizations that I choose, like Nationwide, I agree with them for about 9 years, and I learned a ton, especially in the last, I would say, 3 years, when cloud computing, I'll say 3 to 4 years, cloud computing was really starting to take off with large organizations. Like I was one of the first to really dive into Docker, dive into Kubernetes, dive into, DevOps and DevSecOps and learning about pipelines. And I messed around with Jenkins, Concourse, a lot of the leading CI/CD pipelines. And then I just started to get connected with different projects that would just expose me to more stuff, because it's kind of hard to do a lot of the trending stuff while you're working on the stuff and you're also wanting to have a life. And so that's why if you're going to go into engineering in a career, make sure you're also not just focusing on the money, but is where you're going innovative and always looking to implement the best technologies that are well supported. It gives you opportunity to grow and to constantly be up to speed as to what's being demanded by the market. And it also keeps you focused, because if you try to, there's so many things that comes out in the market. I mean, you have things in Angular, React, and AWS versus Azure, and all these different technologies are constantly pumping out stuff. But which one do you know? Which one do you need to focus on? Which one do you need to spend time on, right? And so my advice in that sense is, if there is a company or a sector that you're interested in, find out what technologies that they are aligned to and target those. Understand what's the latest thing in those particular technology platforms that industry has bought into, because you don't want to be in an interview where, man, I learned all this stuff, but they don't use any of it. And so your excitement is not aligned with the technologies that they're invested in, right? How much better would it be that your passion and the technologies that you studied is aligned with the organization and their investments? And so then that it's just a beautiful match, and then your growth just continues. So that's my take on how I stay current. Is I normally just always make sure that I'm in an innovative organization, and then I'm growing in my role and always researching, always trying to implement the best, but always learning. So.
Awesome. This is a great segue to, mentorship and community. How have you had any mentors throughout your career in tech?
Yeah, so I've had one mentor, and it wasn't an official mentor. He was my tech lead back in Nationwide. And I treated him like a mentor in the sense that I was always watching how he does things. And when he would give explanations on why a decision was made, a technical decision was made, I would really internalize that. I would go to him for advice. And, like, for instance, when I first was approached to take on a tech lead position, I went to him when he moved on to be an architect, and I asked him his thoughts on it. And he advised me, and he basically encouraged me to do it. This is the prime opportunity. I think you're ready, and so on and so forth. And, the rest is history. But yeah, that was, to me, my only mentor. And I worked with him for about, I would say, 3 to 4 years. And we still keep in contact on and off. But find somebody that you admire, because that's what happened with me. I really admired him, and watch that person and engage with that person and pick their brain. It was very easy for me because I sat next to him, and I guess I wanted to be where he was at. And that's another key criteria, which I guess is built into the whole admiration, right? You typically admire someone that you want to be like. And so that's what I did on a day-to-day basis. I would just watch him, imitate him. And it was funny because when I became a tech lead and I started to like do tech reviews and things like that, sometimes I would start to find myself saying things that he would say. And sometimes I would pick up his accent or something. It was hilarious when I would catch myself doing that, because that's how much I was absorbing him, you know? So, but ever since then, I haven't found another mentor. Or at least I haven't found someone that was like, oh man, I really want to be that person. Because then at that moment in time, I would naturally be drawn to that individual and establish that mentorship relationship, whether it's a formal one or an informal one like I had with my former tech lead. But that's what I would pick, and that's what I would do. That's what will make all the difference in the world. So hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, it did. I'm pro having a mentor. I have 4 mentors, and I feel like I wouldn't be where I am today without their help. But yeah, so I'm all for it. What is the most exciting project you have worked on professionally?
Oh man. So this was actually at Nationwide, because it was the most transformative for me and also for the business at the same time. And that's what makes those types of projects so memorable and so much fun. Because prior to that project, I didn't have Angular experience. I didn't have Docker experience, or really cloud experience, and or DevOps experience. And the application, that project, what we were doing, we were modernizing an Access application. And we turned it into a single page application with microservices, Java Spring Boot microservices. But what was powerful about it was, number one, the business. Obviously, working with Microsoft Access is extremely painful. In fact, I'm currently serving an organization within NetJets that has the same problem. That's one of the reasons why I was brought in, because of my experience. But not only was the Access platform so painful, but also we also wanted to solve a problem that was also a pain point for business because of capacity. And they wanted to do other things as well, is always having to put in a request for simple things. Hey, can you create another drop down and you know, for this particular view? Hey, we would like to, when you select this drop down, it's going to, you know, determine the drop down of this dependent child drop down. How can we set it up if we take you up on this pitch, because I was suggesting that we completely rewrite this instead of looking at a third-party solution, which I believe at the time they were thinking about SharePoint. I was like, no, forget SharePoint. You don't want to go that route. You want to have a true modern custom application. He said, if you want us to do that, figure out a way where we don't have to ask for these simple things, because that's one of the promises of SharePoint. I want to be able to add a button. I want to be able to add a text box or a drop down and those types of things without IT involvement. I want to be able to do that, or modify values and things of that nature. I said, okay, no problem. Or at least at the time, I didn't know what I was going to do, but I was like, I know it can be done, period. And as long as I know it can be done, that's all that matters. And so that got me into some serious innovative thinking, leveraging Angular, caused me to learn Angular, caused me to learn, the whole containerization technology, because that's where Nationwide was going at the time. So we were one of the first teams to take advantage of that and to learn and master DevOps with, like I said, Concourse, CI/CD, We were one of the first to leverage liquid base and to build that as part of our pipeline. So when we make database changes, we manage that completely. We also was one of the first to dive into Kubernetes. And so I learned all of that within that time period, along with the whole Angular thing. Fast forward, not only did I learn so much technology, but then I became the SME now when it comes to the cloud computing, DevSecOps, Kubernetes, and I would coach other teams that were trying to move from on-prem to the cloud and help them to build pipelines. And so I was doing that for different teams in the organization and consulting with them. So that was so much fun doing that. But as a final note, the product was so well received by business. The end users were cheering because of how fast it was, and the business stakeholders was also cheering because they had an admin panel that they can just go to and they can just add whatever fields they want. And we also took it to the level where they can apply any validation that they wanted. We had built-in validation that they can apply to any field that they wanted. And if there was a custom validation, we also allowed for regular expression that they can put in there. And then that would be enforced immediately by the press of the button. So that was something I was extremely proud of because it benefited the business, but also it so much benefited me and boosted my career.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, that's great. You were like a thought leader when it came to, the Angular and the SharePoint, creating those different solutions and getting it to the cloud, and then also went beyond your space and helped other teams as well with the cloud migration. So awesome.
Yeah, it was definitely awesome. And then eventually I also got invited to take part in DevSecOps, where I got my team, but primarily it was myself was piloting security pipeline technology so that we are ensuring that the code is secure. And so there were different phases and gates that was established that I was taking part in building in terms of the pipeline and implementing the plugins that that security team provided for me. And it was successful. It was a lot of great feedback. But yeah, those are the opportunities that came because of the knowledge and skills that came out of that project. So again, circles back to the previous point, making sure that you join an innovative organization because that will have a significant impact on your growth potential and your long-term career.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I'm aligned with that. What do you enjoy most about your job?
I'm not going to lie, it's coding. That just lets you know that once a software engineer, you're always a software engineer, at least a true coder. Because I do enjoy problem solving in different ways. I was concerned when I first took on like the tech lead role and things like that, because I'm like, oh man, I'm going to be coming away from the keyboard and I'm going to have to be doing a lot of meetings and I'm not going to be having as much fun. But, my tech lead at the time, my former mentor, he told me that think of it as a different set of problem solving. So you're going to still get that itch scratched. And he's like, don't get me wrong. I love coding too, and I will always need to have a little spice of that. But he said, but you still get that itch, and it's true. I whether it's solutioning an architectural design or whether it's doing pipeline work or things of that nature, it's problem solving. But at the end of the day, if you give me 8 hours of coding, I'm smiling from ear to ear. Uninterrupted, ear to ear smile. It's happening.
Yeah, I feel the same way. Just because, like you're an architect now, and I'm also an architect at NetJets, and we have a ton of like tons and tons of meetings. Our calendars are always full. But
Yeah.
yeah, it is like different problems we're solving. We're solving the business to market problem, right? The business want a solution. How do we get it out to market in a safe, secured way and
Yeah.
fast as well? And to be able to meet all of their features. But then sometimes, right, that's something that I've also struggled with. Like, how do I get more time hands on keyboard? And when I talked
Yeah.
to my mentor about it, he mentioned the same thing. Like there are going to be opportunities where I can scratch that itch with reference implementations, so I can
Yes.
deliver to the team so they can do their work. So yeah, I'm definitely aligned.
Yeah. 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 Those POCs are a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm. What has been the most unexpected aspect of the IT industry for you?
Opportunity. I honestly had no idea the the level of opportunity that was given to me and the momentum that that I received once I took it on. The support, and I guess it's connected with the opportunity because without the support, opportunity is almost non-existent. But yeah, the support that I had from my leadership, stemming all the way from when I was in customer service and my supervisor took interest in that program that I wrote, and then that became visible to upper leadership, and she didn't have to do that. I remember when she went to bat for me with one of the executives saying that, we're wasting this guy's time on the phones when he could be building more solutions and really making a difference for the organization. And that's when the VP gave the sign off to get him off the phones. I mean, that was incredible. And then when I got into the technology organization itself, the support that I had from my managers was incredible. The trust that they had for me was also incredible. Like, sometimes I would take risks. I had an idea that I think would really get the job done that, might be risky on paper. And a lot of people would shy away from that because they would have to own it and be accountable for it. But my manager trusted me. And she basically gave the nod, and I was able to, actually be successful. And the more successful I was, I guess, the more trust was issued to me, and the momentum just continued to build because I like to. And maybe it's connected with my personality. Like I like to really swing for the fences instead of playing safe, because I really want to make an impact, and just the opportunity to do that. So that to me is what was most unexpected. Like I honestly did not expect to be in this position today, because I've been in the tech industry now for about 11 years. And, I've met people that's been in the same position for that same time period. And I just had no idea, but here I am, it worked out. So I guess the lesson for that is if you're willing to swing for the fences, do your best work, in my experience, you'll get rewarded for that, because it's IT and coding and engineering is like magic. It's like you're able to create things that is really going to add value, and it's all about data these days. And you have the ability to create something magnificent that can basically take data and create value for somebody else. And so they're going to reward you if you're able to be a hard worker and you're willing to do what it takes to hit the objectives. My experience, yeah, you're going to go places. So that was most unexpected for me. I had no idea.
Nice, nice. So you got a lot of support from your manager, and then until the executives signed off on everything, you had their support as well. I like the way you worded that. Like you said, on paper it was risky, right? But once you had that support, once they gave you a shot, like you outperformed. So
yeah,
that's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And you know, working with alongside you at NetJets and seeing your work and the impact that you have on the organization as a whole as well. You know, it's been awesome. It's been incredible to work alongside you. So, and again, thank you for coming on the show.
I appreciate it. And obviously, it goes without saying you as well. I mean, you know, you're one of the youngest IT professionals in the organization, and you're a solution architect as well. So that is amazing in and of itself. Yeah, your story is quite amazing. I'm hoping your audience knows a little bit about you so that they can also be inspired.
Appreciate you, brother. And before we end, how can our listeners get a hold of you if they wanted to follow you on social media or reach out?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, they can find me on LinkedIn. They can just look up my name, Ash Barrett, and they're able to find my page, and they can just message me, DM me, and it'll be no problem. Or you can do linkedin.com/in/Ash Tech Leisure. TechLeisure, and that'll take you right to my page as well.
All right. Awesome, brother. All right. Take care. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.